All right, good evening, guys. For those checking into the evening session here, um, wait to get some people in here. For this section from 6 o'clock on the skeletal system. Looks like we got one person in here. If you want to say hello. Thanks for checking in. We'll be talking about the skeletal system today and some things on your project for this upcoming week, this new week, new project week. All right, so good evening. Wait another minute or so, see if we get some more people in here before we begin. If you have any questions, you could ask anytime pertaining to anything about the skeletal system and or the project. Only got one person so far. Okay, well, I'm going to begin anyhow and just start talking about the skeletal system here. And if you have any questions, you can ask as I go, and we'll see if any more participants will come in throughout the evening here. Okay, so the skeletal system. Parts of the skeletal system, obviously, are made up of bones, right? We call those bones skeletons. That's one of the main components of the skeletal system, probably the most important one. And joints. We'll talk about what joints are. They usually are to connect the bones in the body. And something called cartilage, which is important. It's found in between some of our bones in our body, which is a hard tissue-like substance that kind of holds the bones into place. We have something called ligaments, which attach bone to bone, and tendons, which attach bones to muscle. Okay, and these are some of the parts of the skeletal system. The skeletal system is then divided into two sections, and these are the two main sections that we're going to focus on, and that's called the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. So they are kind of divided by some of the parts. I know in our project I mentioned the upper and lower parts or upper and lower limbs that we are going to research, but you could also do the axial and appendicular as well. So the axial skeleton consists of the skull, the spinal column, your vertebrae, and your rib cage. And the appendicular skeleton consists of everything else, your limbs, your legs, your girdle, which is consisted of like your pelvic area, your hip bone. Okay, and that's called the appendicular. So functions of bones, why are they important? Let's learn a few things on why they're important. If you want to type in there too, why you think bones are important or what is a function of the skeletal system, you can answer that as well. One of the most important reasons or functions of bones is that they support our body. So they keep us erect. Without bones, we wouldn't be able to stand up. We'd just be kind of like a blob. So it kind of gives us this structural support that we need. Not only support, but protection as well. Another important factor or function of bones is protection of our organs. For example, our rib cage protects our heart, our liver, our lungs, all enclosed within our rib cage area. Okay, so that's for protection and for support. And then, of course, movement is another function of bones. So movement due to the attached skeleton of muscles. So that would be for running, jogging, playing sports. That is one of our major functions of bones, just walking in general for movement, getting place to place. The functions of bones also partake in the storage of minerals and fats within our bodies as well. And another important factor that or function that they do is they produce blood cell, or they make blood cell formations from the bone marrow, which we talked about in the last unit on um, the circulatory system, which kind of led into that as well. Okay, anybody else checking in here? Right now, like I said, there's only one person in here. Um, I know students are aware of this. I know it seems like my evening, throughout the day, the number of students kind of drop off. I know this is my later hours of the evening here. It seems like the morning sessions are the busiest, and then the afternoons, and then now for the evening here. So if you have any questions, you can stop or just type in the chat bar on anything there as I check back and forth. The skeleton, the adult human skeleton has, excuse me, has 206 bones in our adult human body. Um, Around your age, when you're younger, 11, 12, 13 years old, you have more than 206 bones. I'm not too sure exactly the amount of numbers, but you have more bones than that. But as you get older, they start to grow and they start to fuse together. And that's why you'll have lower number of bones as you get older. That was another interesting fact about the human body. The body, the human body, or the bones, I should say, has two basic types of bone tissue. So these two types of bone tissue are broken down into what they call compact bone and spongy bone. So these are the bone tissues. The compact bone are the outer regions. They're the harder regions of the bone. So they're the outer portions of the bone, are known as the compact bone. The spongy bone is the inner areas of the bone. They're like small needle-like pieces of bone. They're the inner parts of the bone, and they have many open spaces between them. Okay, so that's called spongy bone, and that's where some of the blood vessels may even run into that. So this is bone tissue. Okay, all right. So just kind of moving on from there. All right, now bones are then classified by their shape. There's a couple different shapes that they can be classified by. The first one is called long bone. So bones are longer than they are wider. And examples of long bones would be your arms and your legs. Your humerus, which is one of the longest parts of your arm, your upper arm region is called the humerus, and you have the radii and ulna that run along the sides of your arm, your lower portion of your arm. And then you have the longest bone in your body, which is the femur. There's your leg, your upper leg bone there. Okay, and tibia and fibula are the shorter parts on below the kneecap there, and the patella is also known as the kneecap, the scientific term for it. So your long bones are your arms and your legs. Short bones are another classification of bones. Next, then they're usually square in shape or cube-like. So your wrists, how they would move in a circular fashion, they're a short bone. Same with your ankle as well, would be considered a short bone too. Flat bones are curved. Okay, that's another classification. That is the third classification. Doesn't matter the order. I'm just kind of reading them as they go on here. So the flat bone is curved, and an example for the flat bone would be your skull or your sternum. So your skull obviously is known as your cranium. Sternum is in between your chest area. Your rib cage is a bone between your chest plate there. And then the last classification of bones is called irregular shape. So those are something that's irregular is odd shape. So they don't really have a specific type of shape like a long or short or flat description, but they have odd shapes. So, for example of an irregular bone would be your vertebrae, which is your backbone, kind of as well too. The pelvis is another one. It's your hip bone. That is another odd or irregular shaped bone too. So that would be considered under an irregular shape. So long, short, flat, and irregular are the four shapes of bone. Okay. All right. Moving on. Like I was saying, just an example, long bone would be your arm, your humerus, upper part of your arm. The flat bone would be considered a skull. Your irregular bone would be your vertebrae, and short bones would be your what they call carpal or tarsals, your wrists, your tarsals would be your ankle. These are some of the scientific terms for them. Okay. Next, I'm going to talk about are types of bone cells. There's a couple different types of bone cells, and it comes with the word osteo. Osteo meaning bone. It was a Latin name for bone. So you'll see that a lot or hear that a lot when they're referring to bone, like something like osteoporosis is a illness within a sickness within the bone structure itself. But there's something called osteocytes, and those are mature bone cells and are something called osteoblasts, which are bone-forming cells, and then clasts, which are bone-destroying cells. So they break down the bone for remodeling and release of calcium. So bone remodeling is a process by which osteoblasts and osteoclasts partake in. So those are just some interesting facts on bone cells. So the word osteo comes from bone cells, osteocytes, osteoblasts, and osteoclasts for that classification. The next thing I'm going to talk about is cartilage. In the embryos, the skeleton has primary hyaline cartilage. Okay, so during development, much of this cartilage is replaced by bone. So cartilage remains in isolated areas, like your nose has some areas of cartilage around here, your ears, parts between your ribs, and in between your joints, your elbows, and your kneecaps would be some areas where cartilage. Remember, cartilage is that tough. Um, it's the it kind of gives elasticity and it kind of holds some of these areas in place. So it's like a tissue. It's like a tough muscle tissue there. All right. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the not only the whole human skeleton, but the axial and the appendicular skeleton. So you know the difference between the two in some of their parts there. Okay. Any other questions so far? Looks like I only have one person in here. Nobody else has checked in for this evening. So again, like I said, you can ask questions as I continue on here. All right, so the first part I'm going to talk about is the axial skeleton. So this forms the longitudinal parts of the body. Okay, longitudinal means long ways, and it's divided into three parts: the skull, your head, your vertebral column, which would be your backbone behind you, and the rib cage. Okay, so the axial skeleton consists of those three parts: skull, vertebrae, column, rib cage. So this supports and protects organs from the head, the neck, and your trunk. The trunk is known as your midsection there as well too. Okay. All right. So the next part is called the appendicular skeleton. Now, what the appendicular skeleton includes are parts or the bones of limbs and bones that anchor them into the axial skeleton. So appendicular skeleton would consist of like a pectoral girdle, which your pectoral girdle would be like pectoral means chest, or above the chest area. Your clavicle or collarbone would be considered it connects into your rib cage, okay, because the rib cage would be consisted into the axial skeleton. This is the appendicular. Your scapula, which is your shoulder blade in the back. So this is this is part of the appendicular skeleton. Your upper arms, your humerus, like I was talking about, your upper arm, and even the lower arm as well too. The pelvic girdle, which is your pelvis, okay, and that's like your hip bone. They call that the sacrum or coccyx, and that would be considered in your appendicular skeleton, along with your lower legs, your femur, your tibia and fibula on the lower parts below your kneecap area. The word articulation is a scientific name for joints. It's where joints meet or connect and are formed. So think about the appendicular skeleton as being where the joints are going to meet up at. Okay, so that's the next part here are the joints. So a joint or articulation is a place where two parts or two bones come together. So that's where that's considered as there. Okay. All right. There are some different types of joints. I'm going to go over about 3 different types of joints and give some examples of each, and then I'm going to break those 3 parts down into another section of joints and kind of go over some of them that fall into a certain class of joints there next. So the first class of joints are called immovable joints, or fibrous joints is the scientific name for it. Fibrous or immovable. They connect bones, and they don't move, so there's no movement in them. So your skull would be one, and your pelvis, your hip bone. They don't move other than you shaking your head or shaking your hip, but they're immovable on its own. Okay. The next type of joint is called the cartilaginous joint, or slightly movable joint. So your bones are attached by cartilage. So there's little movement. So for example, that would be your spine on your vertebrae and your ribs. So there's cartilage between those, between your spine. Let's remember that's that tissue, the elastic type of tissue, the cartilage on your nose. It's kind of tough usually. Feels soft, but it's actually pretty tough actually. And your ribs. All right, so ribs, you have cartilage in between your ribs as well there too. All right, and the last type of joint is called a synovial joint. And a synovial joint is a freely movable joint. Okay, so it's much more for much more movement than the cartilaginous joints. So the cavities between the bones are filled with synovial fluid, and this fluid helps lubricates and protects the bones. So synovial or free moving joints would be considered the last group. So fibrous, immovable; cartilaginous, slightly movable; synovial, freely movable type of joints. Okay. Any other questions so far? Okay. All right, moving on. Okay, now there's some types of synovial joints based on their shape. The first one I want to talk about is one called a hinge joint, and then there's a plane joint and a pivot joint. These are some synovial ones, meaning that they have free range of motion. So the hinge joint, all right, is a hinge joint allows extension and retraction of an appendage. Think of a hinge on the door when it opens and closes at a fixed point, just like your elbow. When you want to stretch it, move it, or flex your bicep, that would be considered a hinge right there. Okay, hinge joint. Same with your kneecap is also a hinge joint. So you can you can extend and retract your leg back and forth. So that would be considered as a hinge joint. Okay. Another type of synovial joint or freely movable joint is one called a ball and socket joint. Now, a ball and socket joint allows for radial motion in almost any direction. They're found in your hips and your shoulder. So when you're walking in your hips, there's that joint that kind of, when you pick up your leg and move and continue the walking, the stance for walking, there is kind of like a ball on the upper part of your leg. It fits right into your pelvic girdle there that houses the rotation when we walk or we run. Same with throwing a baseball in your upper part of your shoulder. Okay, so there is when we are able to stretch or move our shoulder to throw a ball, that is a ball and socket joint. I kind of think of it as like kind of like a doorknob in a way where it can turn. All right, so it gives us the ability to turn and to use that in that range of motion. So it allows radial movement in almost any direction, from walking to running to throwing a baseball. It's called a ball and socket joint. Okay. Oh, okay, we got somebody in here right now. Great. Another person, Chris. How are you? Okay, good. Thanks for joining in. If you have any questions, Chris, about the skeletal system, thanks for joining in, partaking. I'm pretty much wrapping up on some parts on the main parts of the joints here. If you have any questions about anything, you can ask at any time. I'm going to go ahead and finish up since I only have a few more slides here on the first part here. So the next part I'm going to talk about is the gliding joint. So a gliding joint is also known as a plane joint. So the bones slide past each other. For example, the mid-carpal and mid-tarsal joints are considered gliding joints. So your hands, like your wrist, all right, that would be considered one. Your feet and hands would be consisted as gliding joints. Okay, all right, all right, good. I'm glad to see you here. You're doing great, and if you have any questions, you could ask at any time during this. Just wrapping some things up on the skeletal system. All right, the next type of joint is one called the saddle joint. The saddle joint is a type of joint that occurs when the touching surfaces of two bones have both concave and convex regions with the shapes of two bones complementing one another and allowing the range of motion or movement. So your thumb would be consistent one, as you could see the thumb moving in different ranges, a wide range of motion. Not fully all the way around, but it can move in more directions than other fingers can. Okay, so that's known as a saddle joint. That's a freely movable joint there too, also known as a synovial joint. Okay, all right. Okay, so Chris, I'm just going to go ahead and talk a little bit about the project here next. Okay. Um, I covered everything I needed to talk about on the basics on the skeletal system, and there's a lot of the different parts of bones too, as well. So you are to provide a diagram on either the upper portions of the torso or the lower portions, from above the waist or below the waist, identifying and the bones and the joints that you can identify and provide information and label those parts. Excuse me. And then also, and or you could do the axial or appendicular skeleton. I went over those. If you don't know what those are, I could provide some information on the appendicular and axial skeleton. I'll put that in here as well. And this will all be on Microsoft Teams here too. Okay, so you'll be able to go ahead and see what to do this week on there. All right, so that's axial and appendicular skeletons. Those are the two types of skeletons there that we were mainly talking about. Okay. And then again, I'm going to be talking about joints. I talked about the joints. I'm going to talk about some of the illnesses and stuff like that that could happen with some of these types of your joints and parts there, with osteoporosis, which is kind of like porous bone, tendonitis. I want to talk about those types of things on Wednesday. Okay, so make sure you label the parts of the bone, the ulna, the radius. I'm going to provide a PowerPoint for you guys too on Microsoft Teams, so you'll have that as of tomorrow. You'll be able to see some of these things too. Okay, so upper parts and the lower parts. So the jawbones known as a hyoid is just another thing. Cranium is another name for the skull. Clavicle is your collarbone. Scapula is your shoulder blade. Sternum is right in the middle between your rib cage here. Your humerus is the upper part of your arm, upper arm bone. Okay, obviously ribs are in the rib cage with the sternum. Those are bones as well. The coccyx or the pelvic girdle is your hip bone. Okay, the radius is the inner part of your arm. Okay, the ulna is the outer part of your arm, that area. Then the femur is your longest bone in your body, your leg bone. The patella is known as the kneecap, your kneecap. The tibia is the front part of your leg bone, and then the back part where your calf is called the fibula. All right, and the tarsals are your ankle bones, and they call the metatarsals your feet, like the bones of your feet, and then those are called metatarsals and phalanges. Same with your hands. Hands are called carpal, all right, and then metacarpal. So then they're opposite of feet, tarsal and metatarsal. The same thing, phalanges are your fingers, okay, on fingers and toes, okay. So those are just some of the main parts, kind of just going over some of those ones there. And don't forget there's a brain pop too. It's on skeleton. It doesn't say skeletal system, it's just called skeleton, so it provides information on a lot of these things that we're talking about right now. So that'll be due on Friday too. So that will be, watch the video, then do the vocab. I would recommend doing the vocab before you take the quiz, because I can't really reset the brain pop if you didn't get a good score. So try your best to start listening to the video and play it maybe once or twice, and then go ahead and do the vocabulary. So I'll help you out with that. Chris, you could turn the project in to me through email or Microsoft Teams. Okay. So I know you've turned in a few things. I don't think I've gotten some of your other assignments. Make sure you're kind of keeping up. I've been contacting some parents today just with students that haven't turned in that much work. So make sure you're kind of keeping up with that. So you could send it to, I'll put my email on here. You could always email it to me. Okay. And when you're done, you can turn it in by Friday at my email at bferko@coastalcharter.org, which I just put up right here. Okay, and or Microsoft Teams. I check them both daily, so you can send them to either way. Jen, got that, Chris? Thumbs up. You can write back, or if you have any other questions. So just be on the lookout on your Teams page. You're on my second period class, right, Chris, or third period? I think you're second block. I think you're my second block class. Or no, you're my last block. You're my last block class. So yeah, that'll be on your page. Just double check the team page for that, for some of the directions, and I'll provide some of these vocabulary words. Third block. That's what I meant. Third block. Yeah. It's been a while since I've seen you guys, so I know what class you guys all belong to and the people that you're with, but it's just I haven't seen um, haven't seen you guys in a while, so it's sometimes hard to remember who's where. I do remember. We doing good tonight? Everything going well? How are your other classes going? Good? Keeping up with other work there too, so make sure you're turning in the work for other classes as well. Good, good. Glad things are going well with you. Okay, excellent, excellent. Any other questions? Like I said, you and just one other person are in here, so I'm kind of turning it over to you guys. If you don't have any questions about what to do, trying to think here what I could ask you, Chris. Can you tell me what a joint is there, Chris? Pertaining to a bone? What is a joint for the bone? Can you tell me what that might be? We were paying attention there. What is a joint relating to the bone of the skeletal system? So can you give me an answer on that? Okay, part of the arm or part of your leg. Well, no, they're not really part of the arm or leg, but they connect. Joints actually help. They kind of is a place where bones come together. So yeah, they could partake. They could be near an arm or a leg. Okay, they would be like your elbow. That would be like a joint between the elbow, the upper part, and the lower part of the arm. Okay, so joints connect, they connect to the two bones that come together. So they could be slightly movable. They could be, they could be freely movable. Or they could be immovable. There's some different types of joints. So fibrous joint or immovable joint would be considered your skull and your pelvis. The cartilaginous joint are slightly movable, so they're attached by cartilage or spine and the ribs, and then synovial, which are freely movable joints. So those are some different types of joints there. Yeah, and your knees. Okay, you put there. Yep, your knee as well. Your knee, like your elbow. Yep. Okay, any other questions, Chris? Yep, my day's going good. Thanks for asking. Anything else related to the skeletal system here that you might want to know extra information for your project of these different types of bones or the types of joints that are connected in between here? So remember, you could do the upper or lower torso torso of the skeleton, and you could do the axial or appendicular skeleton. So just to review what that is, an axial skeleton is divided into three parts: your skull, your vertebrae column, and your rib cage. Okay, is your axial skeleton. All right. The appendicular skeleton is going to be consisted of other parts. They're going to be that's going to be your arms, your legs, okay, and your pelvic area, and those bones that are involved in that area. So think about the bones and the structures in each of those parts, and you're going to have to tell and label what they are. It's like the tibia, the fibula, femur, patella. So I'm just giving you particular names for you to research. These are going to be your skeletal bones. Okay. You could also mention the types of joints between them too. Okay, your question next is, what about the brain? Does it have to be in the upper? Okay, the brain is protected by the skull. The skull's the hard part, the bone part. Okay, the brain's the soft part. That's going to deal with this the nervous system when we study the nervous system. So you don't have to say anything about the brain. Okay, so skull, cranium is another name for it. That's the bone part of the head. Okay, understand that? So you could just put skull, cranium, what it does, how it protects. What it does is protect our brain, right? That's what its main function is. Okay, you got that? Good. Excellent. All right, anything else there? Chris, can you tell me what a hinge joint might be? Like, what part of your body might be a hinge joint? Think of like a door opening, Chris. What would be a hinge joint? Like a door opening and closing? All right. What would be a part of your body? It might be like that. It kind of extends and retracts, kind of doing something in that motion. Hinge joint. What would that? What part of your body? There's a couple different parts of your body where you can extend a part of your body and then retract, meaning coming back, extend and retract. So what would that? What part of your body? You just type it in the chat bar there for a hinge joint. What would be considered there? All right, that's good. That's a good guess. Not your hand. That would be a gliding or sliding joint, like your wrist. Okay, but try that again. Think of another part. I'm kind of giving you a clue here. Going like this, hinge joint would be considered what? Okay, I'm going to try that again for a hinge joint. Okay, your legs curling up, very good. That would be like you extending your kneecap. That would be one, very good. Okay, so like your knee, extending your knee and retracting it, very good. So that would be a hinge joint. And same with your arm for your bicep, with your elbow. Okay, a hinge joint would be just like your arm going back and forth. So that's a hinge joint, very good. So your arm, your knee, and your elbow would be two hinge joint areas. All right, looks like somebody else joined in here. If anybody else has any other questions here for your project, I see somebody else joined in here. All right, Chris, or whoever else is still in here, just as I'm continuing on with some question and answer here. What is a what would be a ball and socket like joint? What is a ball and socket joint? What would be an example of a ball and socket joint? That's another ranging type of joint, just like a hinge joint. So a ball and socket joint would be consist of what? What part of the body might be an example of a ball and socket? Think about maybe throwing a baseball or running or walking fast. What would be an example for a part of the body for the ball and socket joint? Okay, your shoulder. Excellent. Very good. All right, your shoulder throwing a baseball, right? This kind of turns and it moves in a free range motion. So very good. Okay. So that's considered a ball and socket. Like I said, your hand would or wrist would be your gliding joint. Ball and socket would be your shoulder, or it could be your pelvic area. And then the last one I talked about was the hinge joint, which would be your elbow and your kneecap. Okay, like a door hinge. Okay, so those are the types of joints. There was another one that your thumb does, kind of the motion of your thumb. It has a free range of motion, but it can't move all the way completely around, but in most directions it can go. What is that joint called? Do you remember the name of that one? I mentioned it earlier. I don't know if you were in here at that time or not. Okay. All right. You might have missed that part earlier, but that part is called a saddle joint. Your thumb is considered as a what they call a saddle joint. So when one other allowing a wide range of motion in most directions. Okay, is what a saddle joint is. All right, excellent. Good job. Chris and whoever else is in here, who else could state some functions of bones, why they are important? Since you seem to be the main one answering in here, why are they important? So what is a function of bones? Give me a reason why you think bones are important for us. What is one of their main functions? Okay, because all right, you're right. It's important because we need to move, be able to do stuff like walking and moving around. Excellent. So it does help us for movement. Very good. So movement's important. That's one important function of bones. Very good. Another is it supports our body. Okay, keeps us standing upright. If we didn't have bones, right? We would probably we wouldn't have that much structure to ourselves. We'd kind of be just like a blob, right? We don't have nothing holding us up and upright or together. So they provide our body for support. They provide protection. How would they provide protection? Think about your rib cage. What does your rib cage protect? Your rib areas. What area would they might protect on your of some of your organs? So what organs would your rib cage protect? To type that in as an answer there. Okay, your lungs, very good. That's one organ it can protect. It could also protect your heart, right? It protects your liver, your lungs for breathing. So yeah, it protects a lot of important areas around our vital organs, right? The rib cage. So that's how it provides support there. And it's also good for protect storage of minerals and fats and blood cells. It helps makes blood cell formation as well too. So those are some of the important parts of the bones. Do you remember how many bones were in the human body? I don't know if you checked in when I was talking about that or not there too. How many bones are in the adult human body? It's a number. It's a rather big number. I'll give you a clue. It's over 100. Over 100 bones. But do you remember how many to be exact? How many bones are in the human body? Okay, that's a pretty good number. Okay, it's higher than that. It's actually 206. So we have 206 bones in the body, the human body. So when you're younger, like your age, you used to have more than 206. But as you get older, a lot of those smaller bones will form into larger bones, and you'll have less amount. So you have well over 200 bones in your body right now. But when you're an adult, you're fully developed, fully grown, you'll have 206 bones in your body. There were two basic types of bone tissue. Do you remember those? I don't know if you checked in for these or not. The two types of bone tissue. There were two types of bone tissue. Do you remember that? Okay, you don't remember? Okay. All right, the first kind is called, I'll write this down in here, this one's called compact bone. Okay, compact bone or the harder outer parts of the bone. Okay, they're the harder outer surface of the bone. The um, the inner softer parts of the bone are called spongy bones. So those are the two parts. So you got compact bone or the harder outer parts of the bone, and you got the inner parts called spongy bone, which are small needle-like pieces of bone. They have a lot of opening spaces between them. So these are the types of bone, basically bone tissue within the bone itself. All right, there were four types of classified shapes of bones. I don't know if you were in this part either whenever I was talking about it. Do you remember the four shapes of bones? There are four shapes of bones. There are four shapes of bones. You remember that? I don't know if you're still there or not. Chris, are you still there? I lost touch with you there. Right back if you're still here. I only got one person in here, so not too sure who's still participating. All right, I don't think anybody else is still in here at this moment, so I'm probably going to end shortly since there's only one person, unless there's somebody else that wants to write something or communicate back with me here. Okay, well, I don't think anybody else is checking back in, and I haven't heard a response here from anybody yet. So I'm probably going to end this session a little short unless you have any questions pertaining to your project or on the skeletal system. I'm here to answer. But like I said, there's only one person in here, so I'm not too sure who you are. But if you have any questions, you can ask away. I think Chris left since he was the only one communicating with me in this whole session. So I only had 3 people total, and he's the only one I had interaction with here on the skeletal system. Okay, well, my next hours of availability are 8:30 to 9:30 on Wednesday and 1 to 2 on Wednesday. We'll continue reviewing some things on the skeletal system and talk more about the project and go over some of the parts of these bones and types of diseases or illnesses that were related to the skeletal system. So just be aware, look out on your Teams page for some more details pertaining to the project, which will be due on Friday. Okay. All right, guys. I'm signing off for tonight. So have a good rest of your day, and I'll talk to you guys later. All right. Goodbye.